The lobby of Sterling Dynamics gleamed with polished marble and towering glass walls, a monument to corporate success designed to intimidate anyone who dared enter without a tailored suit. Jacob Miller walked through the revolving doors holding his daughter's hand, his worn khaki pants and faded blue button-down standing in stark contrast to the sleek professionals rushing past. 7-year-old Ella clutched a small stuffed rabbit to her chest, her eyes wide as whispers rippled through the waiting area. A receptionist nudged her colleague, smirking at the sight of a man who clearly didn't belong bringing a child to a job interview. Jacob knelt beside his daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Daddy's not giving up, okay?" Ella's lip trembled, but she nodded. 30 feet away, Emily Sterling paused mid-stride, her coffee growing cold in her hand as those words reached her ears. The waiting area had been designed to project power and exclusivity. Leather chairs lined the walls beneath abstract art pieces that cost more than most people earned in a year. It was a space meant to remind visitors exactly where they stood in the hierarchy of the world. Jacob guided Ella to an empty seat in the corner, trying to ignore the pointed stares from other candidates. They were younger, sharper in their appearances, clutching leather portfolios and rehearsing confident smiles. Jacob had none of those things. What he had was a 7-year-old daughter, a resume with gaps he couldn't explain without revealing his grief, and exactly $12 left in his checking account until the end of the month. The babysitter had canceled at 6 that morning. A text message, casual and brief, as if she hadn't just dismantled his only chance at salvation. Jacob had stood in his kitchen, phone in hand, watching Ella eat her cereal, and he had made the only choice he could. He couldn't reschedule. The HR coordinator had made it clear during their phone call that this was a one-time opportunity, that Sterling Dynamics didn't wait for anyone. So here he was, a single father at a corporate interview, his daughter's small hand wrapped around 2 of his fingers like an anchor holding him steady in a storm. A woman emerged from behind the reception desk, her heels clicking against the marble floor with the precision of a metronome. She held a tablet, scrolling through what Jacob assumed was his application. Her name tag read Monica, Human Resources, and her expression suggested she had already made up her mind about him before he had spoken a single word. She said his name like a question she already knew the answer to, her tone dripping with condescension. He stood, gently pulling Ella to her feet beside him. Monica's eyes traveled from his scuffed shoes to the child at his side, and something flickered across her face. "You're here for the IT support position?" "Yes, ma'am." Jacob kept his voice steady, professional. "I see from your file that you've had some employment gaps." Monica tapped her tablet, not bothering to lower her voice. "And you're a single parent, working 2 jobs currently, is that right?" The questions weren't really questions. They were judgments wrapped in professional language. She glanced at Ella with barely concealed disdain. "And you thought it was appropriate to bring a child to a corporate interview?" "My daughter's babysitter canceled this morning," Jacob explained, his hand tightening slightly around Ella's. "I apologize for the unconventional circumstances, but I'm fully prepared for the interview. My qualifications speak for themselves." Monica exchanged another glance with her colleague, a young man who seemed to find the entire situation entertaining. "I'm sure you are." She didn't sound sure at all. "Have a seat. Someone will call you when we're ready." Ella tugged at Jacob's sleeve as they walked back to their corner. "Daddy, why are they looking at us like that?" Her voice was small, confused. He knelt down to her level, blocking out the judgmental stares with his body. "Some people just need time to see what's really important, sweetheart. Don't worry about them. They don't know us yet." He kissed her forehead, smoothing down her hair. "You just sit here and be brave, okay? Daddy's going to show them what we're made of." When he stood, his expression had hardened into something quieter, more determined. He had faced worse than corporate snobbery. He had buried his wife. He had learned to braid his daughter's hair through YouTube tutorials at 2 in the morning. He had survived things that would break most people. Across the lobby, Emily Sterling had been watching the entire exchange from her position near the elevator bank. She had come downstairs to check on a shipment delay, a minor errand that her assistant could have handled. But something had stopped her, some instinct that made her linger. The way the HR staff was treating this man, the barely concealed contempt, the whispered mockery, it turned her stomach. This wasn't the company culture she thought she had built. Emily was 34 years old and had inherited sterling dynamics from her father 3 years ago after his sudden heart attack. She had worked relentlessly to modernize its image, to prove that a woman could lead a tech company without sacrificing integrity for profit. She had implemented diversity initiatives, revised the employee handbook, given speeches about respect at every quarterly meeting. But watching Monica's performance, she wondered if she had been fooling herself. Words on paper meant nothing if the people didn't believe them. Jacob's eyes met hers for just a moment. Brief, almost accidental, but something passed between them. Recognition of two people who understood what it meant to be underestimated. Emily looked away first, troubled by what she had witnessed. She made a mental note to review the hiring practices, to have a conversation with Monica that would be decidedly less pleasant. But for now, she had a company to run. Still, as she stepped into the elevator, she found herself hoping the man with the little girl would surprise them all. The conference room where interviews were conducted occupied the northeast corner of the 12th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of downtown, a reminder of the heights to which successful candidates might ascend. Jacob sat on one side of the long mahogany table. Ella beside him with her coloring book and crayons spread out on a small section she had claimed as her own. Across from them sat 3 members of the hiring committee, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. The man in the center, Richard Garrett, director of operations, hadn't smiled once since Jacob entered the room. "Let's cut to the chase, Mr. Miller." Richard leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Your resume shows a 2-year gap in employment. In this industry, that's practically a lifetime. Technology evolves every 6 months. Care to explain how you expect to be relevant after disappearing for 2 years?" Jacob had prepared for this question, had rehearsed his answer until the words felt hollow. But saying them out loud, in front of his daughter, in front of people who were already convinced he would fail, was harder than he had imagined. "My wife passed away 2.5 years ago." His voice remained steady, but something in his eyes shifted. "I needed time to care for my daughter and to process our loss. I took on part-time work that offered flexibility, jobs that let me be there when she needed me. But it wasn't in my field." The woman to Richard's left, a sharp-featured blonde who had introduced herself as the head of HR, made a note on her tablet with aggressive keystrokes. "So you prioritized personal matters over professional development." It wasn't a question. Jacob felt Ella's hand find his under the table. "I prioritized my family. I don't consider that a weakness. I consider it a responsibility." Richard snorted. "In this business, any absence is a weakness. Technology doesn't wait for grief counseling, Mr. Miller. We need people who are committed, who put the company first, who don't have distractions." His eyes flickered to Ella. The third interviewer, a younger man named Kevin, shifted uncomfortably but didn't intervene. "Let me ask you directly." Richard leaned forward. "Do you honestly believe that someone in your situation, a single father with a young child, can commit to this position? The late nights when servers crash, the weekend emergencies, the constant availability our customers require?" Jacob took a slow breath. He could sense the predetermined verdict in the air. These people had already decided he wasn't worth their time. But Jacob Miller hadn't survived the worst 2 years of his life by accepting defeat gracefully. "With respect," he began, his voice gaining strength, "I've spent the last 2 years managing a household on a fraction of what your junior staff earns. I've learned to optimize every minute of every day because I had no choice. Because my daughter's well-being depended on my efficiency. I've troubleshot computer systems at 2 in the morning while she slept because clients in other time zones needed help and I couldn't afford to lose the work." He paused, meeting Richard's gaze directly. You want to know if I can handle pressure? I've handled pressure that would break most people in this building. I've sat in hospital waiting rooms not knowing if my wife would survive the night. I've explained death to a 5-year-old who kept asking when mommy was coming home. I've rebuilt our entire life from the ground up while working 2 jobs and making sure my daughter never felt unloved. The room had gone completely silent. Ella looked up from her coloring book. Even Richard's smug expression had frozen somewhere between surprise and irritation. I'm here because my daughter deserves better. Jacob's voice filled the room, steady and clear. Better than a father who accepts defeat. Better than a life where she learns that the world is too unfair to fight. If that makes me unqualified in your eyes, then I'm sorry for wasting your time. But I won't apologize for being a father first. The silence that followed was heavy. The HR woman had stopped pretending to take notes. Kevin was staring at Jacob with something like respect, and then the conference room door opened, and Emily Sterling stepped inside. Her expression unreadable, as she looked from the interview panel to the man who had just refused to be broken. The first indication that something was wrong came from the lights. They flickered twice, a subtle stutter that most people would attribute to an electrical glitch. But Jacob, who had spent years working with infrastructure systems, felt his instincts sharpen immediately. Fluorescent lights didn't flicker like that without reason. Seconds later, the conference room's wall-mounted display went dark. Then came sounds from outside, muffled exclamations, hurried footsteps of people whose digital world was collapsing around them. Emily's phone buzzed urgently. She glanced at the screen, and Jacob watched the color drain from her face. This interview is postponed. She was gone before anyone could respond. Richard fumbled with his own phone, his smugness replaced by genuine alarm, and rushed out after her. Through the glass walls, Jacob could see chaos spreading like wildfire. Employees clustered around, monitors displaying error messages. A woman near the elevator was speaking frantically into her phone. Whatever was happening, it was affecting the entire building. "Daddy?" Ella's voice was small. "What's wrong with everyone?" Jacob squeezed her hand reassuringly. "I don't know, sweetheart. But I'm sure they'll figure it out." He settled her into a corner chair. "Stay right here, okay? Color me a picture. I'll be right where you can see me." Jacob moved to the door, observing the chaos in the hallway. He caught fragments of conversation breach, ransomware, every system down. His pulse quickened. He knew those words intimately. 3 years ago, before everything fell apart, he had been on the front lines of exactly this kind of battle. Through transparent walls, he could see Emily standing amid her technical team, her composure cracking as one staffer after another shook their heads. No one had answers. No one knew how to stop what was happening. Jacob picked up Ella, carrying her closer to the IT department. One of the large monitors displayed cascading code, error messages scrolling too fast for most people to read. But Jacob's trained eyes caught something in the pattern, a familiar signature buried in the noise. He stopped, breath-catching. He knew this code. He had seen it before, had spent weeks dissecting its architecture at his previous job. The job he had lost because he dared to take time off when his wife was dying. Emily's voice cut through the noise, sharp with desperation. "Someone tell me we have a solution. Someone tell me we're not about to lose everything we've built." Her technical team exchanged helpless glances. No one spoke. Jacob shifted Ella in his arms, his mind racing. He shouldn't get involved. He wasn't an employee, but the code on that screen was eating through Sterling Dynamics' defenses like acid, and in 10 minutes, it would reach core financial systems, client data, banking information. After that, there would be nothing left to save. He moved toward Emily, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think I know what that is." She turned, surprise flickering across her features as she recognized him. "What did you say?" Jacob nodded toward the monitor. "The malware. I've seen this pattern before. I know how to stop it." The command center was a war room of blinking servers and desperate technicians. Emily stood at its center as the disaster's scope became clear. Every system had been compromised: client data, financial records, proprietary software, all being encrypted by malware that anticipated every countermeasure. Douglas, the head of cybersecurity, was sweating through his expensive shirt. "We've tried everything. Standard isolation protocols, backup restoration, manual shutdowns. Nothing works. This thing is adaptive. Every time we block one avenue, it finds another." That was when Jacob stepped forward, still carrying Ella. The technical staff looked at him with confusion and dismissal. Douglas actually laughed. "Who is this?" "Security. We have an unauthorized person in the server room." Emily raised a hand. "He says he knows how to stop it." Douglas's laugh died. "You can't be serious. He's a random guy from the interview pool." "This malware," Jacob said quietly, "uses a polymorphic encryption engine with a self-modifying code base. Every time your system tries to quarantine it, it rewrites itself and finds a new attack vector. Standard antivirus can't touch it because it's never the same program twice. It's learning from your defenses, adapting in real time." The room went silent. Douglas's face had gone pale. "How do you know that?" "Because I fought this exact code before. 3 years ago, at Meridian Tech. It took down their entire network in under an hour. But before it did, I found the kill switch." Emily stepped closer. "Why didn't anyone else find it?" "Because they fired me before I could document it." Jacob's voice was flat, matter of fact. "I took time off when my wife got sick. My supervisor decided that made me unreliable. When I came back after she passed, my access had been revoked, and my work had been credited to someone else. The company never recovered. Last I heard, they're still in bankruptcy proceedings." Ella tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, I finished my picture." She held up a crayon drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Jacob's expression softened instantly. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. That's the best picture you've ever made." He turned to Emily. "I need about 2 minutes at one of your terminals. If I'm wrong, you've lost nothing. If I'm right, I can save your company." Emily made a decision that went against every protocol. She looked at this man, this single father who had been mocked in her lobby, and she saw something her expensive consultants didn't have: give him access. Douglas sputtered. "Emily, this is insane." Emily silenced him with a look. "Something is already wrong. None of you have been able to fix it." Jacob set Ella down gently. "Daddy needs 2 minutes, okay? Just like at home when I fix our computer." She nodded, clutching her drawing. He sat at the nearest workstation, fingers finding the keyboard with practiced ease. The code was familiar, an old enemy wearing new clothes. He had spent weeks learning its language, understanding its logic, finding the single thread that would unravel the entire tapestry. His fingers moved with speed and precision, bypassing the compromised firewall using a backdoor technique that had been obsolete for years. Modern systems didn't account for it anymore. Which is exactly why it still worked. 17 seconds. That was how long it took for the malware's spread to halt, for the cascade of error messages to slow and then stop entirely. The room held its breath. On the main display, the encryption process had frozen mid-execution. Systems that had been offline began flickering back to life. Douglas stared at the screen. "That's impossible. You couldn't have in 17 seconds. Jacob pushed back from the terminal. "The malware has a dependency loop in its core replication module. Interrupt the timing sequence at exactly the right moment, and it crashes before it can adapt. But you have to know where to look, and you have to be fast." Emily stepped forward, her eyes moving between Jacob and the stabilizing systems. "You did this in 17 seconds. I've had 3 years to think about it. 3 years of carrying a solution nobody wanted to hear." He stood, moving back to Ella. "Your systems should be recovering now. You'll want to run a full diagnostic to make sure there's no residual damage." And you might want to update your firewall protocols. The back door I used shouldn't exist anymore." He turned toward the door, ready to leave the same way he had entered. Emily's voice stopped him. "Mr. Miller." "Please wait." Emily's private office was warm, personal, filled with photographs and books that suggested actual reading rather than decoration. She had insisted Jacob and Ella join her here, away from the chaos of the recovering IT department. The little girl was contentedly eating chocolate chip cookies that Emily's assistant had provided, her feet swinging happily beneath her chair. "Tell me everything," Emily said. From the beginning, Jacob hesitated. He had spent so long burying this story. But something in Emily's expression made him want to try. "I was a cybersecurity specialist at Meridian Tech. Not senior level, but good at what I did. I had a talent for seeing patterns others missed, for understanding how attackers thought. When I got hired at 28, I thought I had finally made it." He paused. "Then Sarah got sick. My wife. Ovarian cancer. Stage 3 by the time they caught it. She fought hard. Chemo, radiation, surgeries, everything the doctors suggested. I took leave to be with her, to hold her hand during the bad days. The company had a policy 60 days of family medical leave. I thought they meant it." Ella reached out to touch her father's hand. The gesture seemed to anchor him. "But when I came back after she passed, everything had changed. My projects reassigned. My access revoked. The work I'd done on the malware response, months of research, credited to my supervisor, a man named Patterson who had never written a line of security code in his life." His voice hardened. "He told HR I was unreliable, that I put family before work. 2 weeks after I buried my wife, they terminated my employment. Escorted me out like a criminal." Emily listened without interruption, her hands clasped tightly on the desk. "The attack happened 6 months after they let me go. By then, I was working 2 part-time jobs just to keep the lights on. Night shift at a warehouse, weekend IT support for small businesses. Ella was having nightmares every night, asking for her mother." He met Emily's eyes. "I heard about the attack on the news. Watched my old company crumble. Watched 3,000 people lose their jobs. And I knew that if they had listened to me, if they had given me the chance to finish my work, it never would have happened." Emily was quiet for a long moment. "The man who stole your work, what happened to him?" Jacob's laugh was hollow. "Promoted. VP at some company in Seattle. 6-figure salary, corner office. The world doesn't always punish the guilty, Miss Sterling. Sometimes it rewards them." Emily nodded slowly. "I've spent 3 years trying to build a company that does things differently, where talent matters more than connections, where character matters more than credentials." She glanced toward the door. "Today showed me how wrong I was. The way my staff treated you, that's not the company I want to lead." She turned back to him. "I'm going to review our entire hiring process, every policy, every protocol. Because if we almost missed someone like you, how many others have we turned away?" The hours following Jacob's intervention revealed fault lines within Sterling Dynamics. The IT department, humiliated by their failure and saved by an outsider, fractured into camps. Some were grateful, others were resentful. Douglas fell firmly into the latter category. He found Emily in the hallway, his face flushed with indignation. "You cannot seriously be considering keeping that man involved. He's a security risk. For all we know, he could be connected to the attack itself. He shows up on the same day as a major breach, somehow knows exactly how to stop it." "That's too convenient." Emily's response was measured. "He solved a problem your entire team couldn't touch. In 17 seconds. That's exactly my point. How did he know what to do unless he had inside information? Douglas, I want you to listen carefully." Her voice went cold. "I watched you and your team flounder for 30 minutes while our systems were destroyed. I watched you dismiss every suggestion. Then I watched a man you laughed at do in seconds what you couldn't do in hours. Douglas opened his mouth, but Emily wasn't finished. If you have evidence Mr. Miller was involved, present it. Document it. But if all you have is wounded pride, redirect that energy toward figuring out how this happened in the first place. Monica appeared at Douglas's elbow. Miss Sterling, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Emily ignored her. This company will not punish competence. It will not dismiss talent because it comes in unexpected packages, and it will not protect egos at the expense of excellence. She turned and walked away, leaving Douglas and Monica to contemplate the ruins of their assumptions. Jacob, still in Emily's office with Ella, had heard enough through the partially open door. Part of him wanted to leave quietly, to avoid the conflict his presence had created. He was tired of being a battleground. He lifted Ella from her chair. "Time to go, sweetheart." She looked at him with those clear eyes. But Daddy, the nice lady, wanted to talk more. She gave me cookies. They made it as far as the lobby before Emily caught up, slightly out of breath, as if she had run down several flights of stairs. "Jacob, please wait." He turned, Ella still in his arms. Emily looked different, less polished, more human. A strand of hair had come loose from her careful arrangement. "I heard what happened," she said. "The confrontation with Douglas. I'm sorry you had to witness that." Jacob shook his head. "You don't owe me an apology. You defended me when you didn't have to. No one's done that in a long time." Emily moved closer, her voice dropping. "My company treated you badly before you ever had a chance to prove yourself." They stood in the lobby, the same space where Jacob had been mocked hours earlier. The receptionist watched from behind her desk, her expression now uncertain rather than contemptuous. "I know this has been an unusual day," Emily continued, "and I know you have every reason to walk out that door and never look back. But I'm asking you not to. I'm asking you to give this company and me another chance." Jacob studied her face, searching for deception. He found nothing but sincerity. "Why would you trust someone like me? I'm nobody. I'm just a single dad who showed up at the wrong interview with his kid." Emily's answer was immediate. "Because you put your daughter first. That tells me everything about the man you are. Anyone can be impressive on a resume, but character shows in the choices we make when no one's watching. You chose your daughter. That's exactly the kind of person I want building my company." The elevator doors opened behind them. Jacob looked at Ella. "What do you think? Should we give them another chance?" Ella considered, with all the gravity a 7-year-old could muster. Then she smiled, the first real smile she had shown all day. "The nice lady gave me cookies, Daddy, and she has pretty flowers in her office. Maybe she's not so bad." Despite everything, Jacob laughed. It was a small sound, rusty from disuse, but genuine. When he looked at Emily, something had shifted in his expression. Not quite trust, but the possibility of it. The boardroom had been hastily convened for what Monica called an emergency personnel review. Department heads, legal counsel, and senior executives occupied the long table. Emily sat at the head, her expression unreadable. Jacob stood near the door with Ella, uncertain whether they should be present. "The purpose of this meeting," Emily began, "is to address today's events and make a decision about Mr. Miller's potential employment." Douglas spoke immediately. "With respect, there's nothing to discuss. We have protocols, background checks, reference verification, skills assessment. None of that has been completed. We cannot hand a position to someone because he was useful during a crisis." Monica nodded vigorously. "The liability implications are significant. If something were to go wrong, the company would be exposed to enormous risk." Emily turned to Jacob. "You've heard their concerns." Jacob stepped forward. "I understand your concerns. I wouldn't trust me either, based on what you know. I'm a stranger who touched your systems without authorization." He paused. "But here's what I know. Your company was under attack, your systems were failing, and your team, with all their credentials and experience, couldn't stop it. I could, not because I'm smarter, but because I'd seen this enemy before and spent 3 years thinking about how to beat it. He looked around the room. You want to know if you can trust me? Trust isn't something you prove with documents. It's something you build through actions. All I can tell you is that I've spent 2 years working jobs that barely paid the bills, struggling to give my daughter a life she deserves. I came here because I needed one chance. Emily pulled a tablet from her briefcase. I had my assistant run a background check during the crisis. She slid it to Monica. Mr. Miller's former employer had multiple lawsuits filed against them after their collapse. Former employees testified that leadership falsified records and stole intellectual property. The supervisor who took Mr. Miller's work was named in 3 depositions. The room went quiet. It proves this man was wronged, Emily continued. The gaps in his resume aren't signs of incompetence, but of a system that punished him for being a good father and husband. She stood. I'm offering Mr. Miller a position as head of our new cybersecurity initiative. Competitive salary, comprehensive benefits, flexible schedule. Before I accept, Jacob said, I have a condition. Emily raised an eyebrow. Name it. Jacob looked at Ella. I need to pick my daughter up from school every day. I need to be home for dinner every night. I won't miss her childhood for any job, no matter how good the offer. Douglas scoffed. The position requires round-the-clock availability. Client emergencies don't follow school schedules. Emily turned to him. Then we'll restructure the position to accommodate a human being with human needs. Unless you're suggesting our survival depends on exploiting employees rather than respecting them, Douglas had no response. Jacob felt something crack open in his chest, something sealed shut for years. I accept. Ella tugged his hand. Does that mean you got the job, Daddy? Jacob knelt, pulling her into a hug. Yeah, sweetheart. Daddy got the job. Over Ella's shoulder, he saw Emily watching them, her expression soft. Something unspoken passed between them, too fragile to name but too real to ignore. The following weeks transformed Sterling Dynamics in ways no one had anticipated. Jacob's presence became a catalyst for change. He built a cybersecurity team from the ground up, recruiting talent other companies had overlooked: young people with unconventional backgrounds, career changers, single parents like himself. The team's diversity became its strength. But the changes weren't just technical. Jacob's insistence on maintaining boundaries between work and family began influencing company culture. Other employees started leaving on time for their children's events, taking vacation days without guilt. Emily found herself manufacturing reasons to visit his department, to ask questions about security protocols she didn't need answered. She noticed things about him: how his face softened when he mentioned Ella, how he treated his team with genuine respect, how he carried himself with dignity even when others tried to diminish him. One evening, she found him still at his desk long after most employees had gone. Ella was there too, doing homework at a small table he had set up in the corner of his office. Working late? Emily leaned against the doorframe. Jacob looked up with a tired smile. Just finishing documentation. Ella's bus was delayed, so I had her brought here. Emily walked in, crouching beside Ella's table. That's impressive work. You're very smart. Ella beamed. Daddy helps me with the hard ones. He says math is just patterns, and once you see the patterns, everything makes sense. Emily glanced at Jacob, something warm flickering in her eyes. Your daddy is a wise man. Later, after Ella had fallen asleep on the small couch Jacob kept in his office, Emily and Jacob stood by the window, looking out at city lights. I never thanked you properly, she said quietly, for what you did that first day. Jacob shook his head. You gave me a chance when no one else would. That's worth more than any thanks. It wasn't just about the company. Emily turned to face him. It was about seeing someone who refused to be broken by circumstances that would have destroyed most people. Someone who kept fighting when fighting seemed pointless. The air between them felt charged, full of possibility. Jacob wanted to reach out, to bridge the distance. But he was aware of who he was and who she was, employee and CEO, single father and corporate leader. "I should get Ella home," he said finally. "School night." Emily nodded, stepping back. "Of course. I'll see you tomorrow." But as Jacob gathered his sleeping daughter in his arms and headed for the door, Emily called after him. "Jacob?" He turned. "I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you stayed." The smile he gave her was small but genuine. "So am I." The morning sun filtered through the glass walls of Sterling Dynamics, painting golden rectangles on the lobby floor. Jacob walked through the same revolving doors he had entered months ago, but everything was different now. Employees greeted him by name, with genuine warmth. The receptionist, who had once smirked at his appearance, now smiled with actual friendliness, asking about Ella's school projects. He took the elevator to his floor, reviewing the day's agenda. Security audit at 10, team meeting at 2, board presentation at 4. The rhythm of professional life had become natural again, but it was different this time. He wasn't sacrificing his soul for success. He wasn't missing his daughter's childhood. He had found balance. In her office on the top floor, Emily Sterling stood at her window, watching the city come alive. She had a meeting with investors in an hour, but her mind kept drifting to a man who had refused to be diminished, to a little girl who had shown more courage in a corporate lobby than most executives showed in their entire careers. Her assistant appeared at the door. "Miss Sterling, your 9 o'clock is here." Emily turned from the window, her professional mask settling back into place. "Send them in." But as she walked to her desk, she paused at the small crystal bowl on her credenza. Inside it, carefully preserved, was a crayon drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Ella had given it to her the day Jacob officially started, pressing it into her hands with the solemn instruction to put it somewhere you can see it when you're sad. Emily smiled, a private expression that no one else would see. Then she straightened her jacket and prepared to face the day, carrying with her the quiet knowledge that sometimes the most important things in life arrived in the most unexpected packages. In the lobby below, Jacob stepped out of the elevator and headed toward his department. His phone buzzed with a message from Ella's school, a reminder about the parent-teacher conference that afternoon. He typed a quick acknowledgement, already rearranging his schedule to accommodate it. Some things had changed since that desperate day when he had walked into Sterling Dynamics with nothing but hope and his daughter's hand in his. Some things were still changing, but one thing remained constant: the commitment he had made to never let work consume the life he was working to build. Outside, the morning sun continued to rise over the city, painting the buildings in shades of gold and amber. 2 stick figures held hands under a yellow sun, preserved in crystal and memory, a reminder that courage came in all sizes, and that sometimes the people who saved us were the ones we least expected. The day stretched ahead, full of challenges and opportunities, and Jacob Miller walked to meet it with the quiet confidence of a man who had finally found his place in the world.